The first
on the
time my
charge of
son
murder
called
in
me
the first
crazy
degree.
was in a courtroom.
We, the jury,
I was
find
standing
the
just a few
defendant
feet
guilty.
away from him, my hands
I
trembling.
understand the charges, Your Honor,
My heart
but I
pounding
cannot
so
confirm I
loudly
was present
I could
that
barely
evening.
hear anything else.
My sister is mistaken about what
And
she
yet
saw.
I heard that word clearly. Crazy. Jason didn't even look at me when he said it. He looked straight
Given your
at the
previous
judge,
testimony,
calm, confident, like
How
he was
exactly
talking
do you
about
explain
a
this
stranger.
new evidence?
For a moment, I wondered if I had really forgotten something, if maybe I was losing my mind. Then the judge leaned forward, steepled his fingers, and asked Jason one quiet question. And suddenly, my son stopped talking. If you've ever been betrayed by someone you trusted, I want you to stay with me on this one. Please like and subscribe if stories like this speak to you. And tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is for you right now. I read every single one, and it reminds me we're not as alone as we sometimes feel. Before anyone ever called me crazy, before courtrooms and accusations and strangers whispering behind my back, I was just a mother. My name is Heidi Ramos. I'm 68 years old, and for most of my life, I believed I had done one thing right. I raised my son with everything I had. I wasn't always strong. I became strong because I had no other choice. When my husband died, Jason was only 9 years old. I still remember the night I had to sit him down on the edge of his bed, his small hands clutching his favorite baseball glove, and tell him his father wasn't coming home. He didn't cry right away. He just stared at me confused, like the world had suddenly shifted, and no one had explained the rules anymore. That was the moment I knew I didn't have the luxury of falling apart. So I didn't. I worked 2 jobs for years. During the day, I was a bookkeeper at a small accounting firm in San Diego. At night, I took on freelance work tax prep payroll reports, anything that would bring in a little extra. I learned to stretch every dollar until it felt like it might tear in half. But Jason never went without. He had clean clothes, school supplies, birthday presents, even if they were small. I never missed a parent-teacher conference. I sat through every baseball game, even when I was so tired, my vision blurred under the stadium lights. And Jason? He noticed. He was a good boy. "Mom, when I grow up, I'm gonna take care of you," he used to say, wrapping his skinny arms around me after I came home late. "You won't have to work anymore." I would smile, kiss the top of his head, and tell him, "You already are, sweetheart, just by being you." For a long time, I believed that. Jason grew into a responsible young man. He did well in school, better than I ever could have hoped. When he got accepted into college, I cried harder than I had the day he was born, not because I was sad, but because I knew every sacrifice had been worth it. I paid for his tuition the only way I knew how, slowly, painfully, and without complaint. I refinanced the house. I dipped into my savings. I said no to things I needed so he could have things he wanted. And when he graduated, standing there in his cap and gown, scanning the crowd until his eyes found mine, I thought, this is it. This is the moment everything comes full circle. He made it. We made it. After college, Jason got into real estate. He had a natural charm. People liked him, trusted him. He knew how to talk, how to smile at just the right moment, how to make someone feel like they were making the best decision of their life. I was proud of him. For a while, he still called me every Sunday. "Hey, Mom, just checking in." We'd talk about everything, his clients, his goals, the future he was building. Sometimes he'd stop by with groceries or fix something around the house. He'd hug me before he left the same way he used to when he was a kid. I held on to those moments more than I probably should have. Then Emily came into his life. At first, I thought she was lovely, polite, well-spoken, always smiling. She brought wine when she visited, complimented my cooking, asked me questions about my life like she genuinely wanted to know the answers. But there was something about her I couldn't quite place. Not wrong, just careful. Like every word she said had already been rehearsed. Jason fell hard for her. I could see it in the way he looked at her, like she was the center of gravity, pulling everything else toward her. They got married within a year. After that, things started to shift. Not all at once. Not in a way you could point to and say, there. That's when it changed. It was slower than that, subtle. Jason's Sunday calls became every other week, then once a month, then sometimes not at all. When I called him, he'd sound distracted. Hey, Mom, can I call you back? I'm in the middle of something. Mom, I've got a showing in 10 minutes. Mom, Emily and I are heading out. We'll talk later. Okay. Later rarely came. When I invited them over for dinner, Emily would smile apologetically. Oh, Heidi, we'd love to, but things are just so busy right now. Always busy, always something. I told myself it was normal. People grow up. They build their own lives. They don't need their mothers the same way anymore. That's what I told myself. But there were moments, small ones, that stayed with me. One afternoon, Jason stopped by unexpectedly. I remember, because I had just finished balancing my monthly accounts, the papers still spread across the kitchen table. He walked in, glanced at the documents, and said casually, "You're still doing all that yourself?" I laughed. Of course. Keeps my mind sharp. He didn't laugh back. Instead, he pulled out a chair and sat down across from me, his expression different. Not cold, not exactly, just distant. You know, Mom, he said you don't have to keep handling everything on your own anymore. I frowned slightly. What do you mean? I mean, he continued, leaning forward. You're not getting any younger. It might be a good idea to let me help. With your finances, your accounts, all of it. I felt something tighten in my chest. Not fear, not yet. Just unease. I've been managing just fine, I said gently. I know, he replied quickly. I'm just saying it wouldn't hurt to have someone double-check things, in case you miss something. Miss something. The words echoed longer than they should have. I smiled, but it didn't feel natural. I don't think I'm at that point yet, Jason. He held my gaze for a second too long. Then he smiled too, but his smile didn't quite reach his eyes. Of course, he said, just trying to help. At the time, I told myself I was overthinking it, that he was just being a good son, that everything was still normal. I had no idea that conversation was the beginning of everything unraveling. Looking back now, I wish I had trusted that feeling in my chest, that quiet voice that whispered, something isn't right. But I didn't, because when it comes to your own child, you don't want to believe that voice could ever be telling you the truth. Looking back now, I can pinpoint the exact moment when trust quietly began to turn into something else. It didn't feel like betrayal at the time. It felt like concern. That's what made it so dangerous. A few weeks after that conversation at my kitchen table, Jason came by again, this time with Emily. She carried a small leather folder tucked neatly under her arm, the kind professionals use. It struck me as odd, but I didn't think much of it then. I had made coffee, set out cookies, tried to make it feel like one of our old visits, but it wasn't. There was a stiffness in the air, a purpose. We barely made it through small talk before Jason leaned forward. Mom, we've been thinking about what we talked about last time. I set my cup down slowly. About my finances, he nodded. Yeah, I want to make sure everything is secure, protected. Emily chimed in gently, her voice smooth. It's really common, Heidi, especially nowadays. Identity theft, banking issues. Even simple accounting errors can become big problems. I smiled politely, though something inside me tightened again. I've been managing my accounts for over 30 years. Of course, she said quickly. And you've done an amazing job. But sometimes it helps to have a second set of eyes. Jason slid a document across the table toward me. It's just a limited authorization, he said. Nothing major. It just lets me help monitor things. Pay bills if you need it. Handle anything urgent. I didn't touch the paper right away. Instead, I looked at him. Really looked. There was something in his expression I couldn't quite read. Not impatience. Not exactly. Expectation. Like he already knew what I was going to do. What's the rush? I asked softly. Jason shrugged. There's no rush. I just thought it'd be easier if we set things up now instead of waiting until something goes wrong. Emily nodded in agreement. Prevention is always better than fixing problems later. I reached for the document more out of instinct than decision. The words blurred slightly as I scanned them. Legal language, dense, precise. The kind of thing I used to review carefully at work, but here in my own kitchen with my son sitting across from me, it felt different, safer. Or maybe I just wanted it to be. Do I need a lawyer to look at this? I asked. Jason laughed lightly. Mom, it's just a form. People sign these all the time. That word again. It's just paperwork. It's just a signature. It's just help. Emily placed her hand gently over mine. We're family, Heidi, she said softly. There's nothing to worry about. I wish I could say I trusted my instincts in that moment. But I didn't, because everything in me had been built on trusting him. So I picked up the pen. And I signed. At first, nothing seemed different. Days passed, then weeks. My routine stayed the same. I still balanced my accounts every month. I still paid my bills on time. I still lived my quiet, predictable life. But then, little things started happening. Small enough to ignore, big enough to remember. One afternoon, I logged into my bank account and noticed a transfer I didn't recognize. It wasn't a large amount, just a few $1,000s moved from one account to another. I frowned, trying to recall if I had done it myself. Maybe I had. Maybe I had just forgotten. The thought lingered longer than it should have. I called Jason. Hey, sweetheart, I said when he picked up. Quick question, did you move some money between my accounts? There was a brief pause, then casually. Oh yeah, I did. Just reorganizing things, making it easier to manage. My grip on the phone tightened slightly. I would have liked to know. I figured it wasn't a big deal, he replied. It's all your money, just in different places. I hesitated. Still, I'd prefer you tell me first. Mom? He said, his tone still calm, but slightly firmer. That's kind of the point of the authorization. So I can handle things without bothering you every time. Bothering me. I swallowed. I'm not bothered. I just want to stay informed. You are informed, he said. You just didn't notice until now. The words stung more than I expected. I forced a small laugh. Well, I noticed. Exactly, he replied. So, everything's working fine. We hung up shortly after. I told myself he was right, that I was being overly sensitive, that it was still normal. But then came the second moment, and this one I couldn't explain away as easily. I received a letter in the mail, a routine statement from the bank. Only, it wasn't routine. At the top, under account ownership, I saw something that made my chest go cold. My name was still there, but it wasn't alone anymore. Jason Miller, joint account holder. I read it twice, 3 times. My hands started to shake. I didn't remember agreeing to that. Not explicitly, not clearly. I called him again, my voice tighter this time. Jason, why is your name on my account? Oh, he said, like it was nothing. That's part of the setup we talked about. No, I said quickly. We talked about you helping manage things, not becoming a joint owner. It's just easier this way, he replied. Less paperwork, fewer restrictions. I felt my heartbeat in my throat. You should have told me. I thought I did. You didn't, I said more firmly now. There was a pause. Then Emily's voice in the background, faint but unmistakable. She probably forgot Jason. Forgot. That word again. Jason exhaled slowly. Mom, you've been a little forgetful lately. The room seemed to tilt slightly. I am not forgetful, I said, but my voice sounded weaker than I intended. I'm not saying it's a bad thing, he continued. It happens. That's why I'm helping. Helping. I hung up before I said something I couldn't take back. That night, I sat alone at my kitchen table, the same one where I had signed those papers, and tried to retrace every step, every conversation, every signature, every moment I might have misunderstood. But the harder I tried to piece it together, the more uncertain I felt. Had I really agreed to more than I thought? Had I missed something? Or was I being led to believe that I had? For the first time in my life, I questioned something I had always relied on. My own memory. And that was far more frightening than anything Jason had said. Because if I couldn't trust my own mind, then what exactly did I have left? The morning I realized something was truly wrong didn't come with a loud warning. There was no dramatic moment, no raised voices, just silence, and a number that didn't make sense. I was sitting at my kitchen table again, the same place where I had signed those papers weeks earlier. Sunlight filtered through the window, warming the edge of the table, catching the dust in the air. It should have felt like any other morning, but it didn't. Because the number on my bank statement was wrong. Not slightly wrong. Not something you could explain away with a forgotten bill or a small transfer. Wrong in a way that made my stomach drop. I stared at it for a long time, my eyes moving back and forth between the lines, trying to make the math work. I had always been precise with my finances. Numbers didn't confuse me. They grounded me. But now, nothing added up. A large withdrawal, followed by another, then another, each one authorized, each one bearing my name. I could feel my pulse in my temples. No, I whispered to myself. That's not right. I opened my old ledger, the handwritten one I kept for my own records, even in the age of digital banking. Every deposit, every bill, every expense, carefully documented. There was no record of those withdrawals. Not one. My hands began to tremble as I flipped through the pages faster, searching for something, anything that would explain it. But there was nothing. Only a growing sense that something had been taken from me, without my knowledge, without my permission. I reached for my phone and dialed Jason again. This time, I didn't wait for pleasantries. Jason, I said the moment he answered, I need you to explain something to me. There was a pause longer than usual. What's going on, Mom? There are withdrawals from my account. Large ones. I didn't authorize them. Another pause. Then calmly I did. The words landed heavily. You did? I repeated, my voice rising slightly. Without telling me. I didn't think it was necessary to go over every transaction, he replied. I'm managing things now. Remember managing? The word made something inside me snap just a little. You're not managing my life, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. You're supposed to be helping me, not making decisions without me. I am helping you, he insisted. Those funds were moved for investment purposes. It's smarter long term. Investment, I echoed. In what? There was hesitation, then real estate opportunities. You know I'm in that business. I felt a chill run down my spine. You used my money, I said slowly, to invest, without asking me first. I'm making it grow, he replied. You should be thanking me. Thanking him for taking control of what I had built over a lifetime. No, I said more firmly now. No, Jason, that's not how this works. There was a shift in his tone then, subtle but unmistakable. Mom, he said, you're overreacting. The room felt suddenly smaller. I am not overreacting, I said. You crossed a line. You're emotional right now, he continued. You're not seeing the bigger picture. I closed my eyes briefly, trying to steady myself. I want access back, I said. Full control. I want my accounts returned to how they were. Silence. Then slowly, that's not a good idea. My eyes snapped open. Excuse me? You've been forgetting things, he said carefully. Missing details. This is exactly why I stepped in. That is not true, I said sharply. And even if it were, that doesn't give you the right to take over everything. I'm not taking over, he replied. I'm protecting you. Protecting me. From what? From myself. The realization hit me like a slow-moving wave. This wasn't just about money anymore. This was about control. And somehow, he had positioned himself as the one in charge. I didn't agree to this. I said, my voice quieter now, but stronger. Yes, you did, he said. No, I didn't. You signed the documents, Mom. The words echoed in my mind. You signed the documents. I had, but not like this. Not knowingly. I trusted you, I whispered. And you still can, he replied almost gently. But you need to let go a little. Let go of my independence, of my decisions, of myself. I hung up again, but this time there was no confusion left. Only clarity. Something had been taken from me, and it wasn't just money. That afternoon, I drove to the bank in person. I needed to see someone face to face, someone who could tell me I wasn't imagining things. The young woman at the front desk greeted me with a polite smile. How can I help you today? I need to review my account access, I said, placing my statement on the counter. There have been changes I didn't authorize. She glanced at the document, then typed something into her computer. Her smile didn't fade, but it changed. Subtly, like she suddenly knew more than I did. Mrs. Ramos, she said carefully, it looks like your son has full authorization on your accounts. I'm aware of that, I replied. But I didn't authorize these transactions. She hesitated. Well, according to our records, everything was signed and approved. By me, I asked. Yes. The word felt like a door closing. Can you show me the documents? I asked. She nodded and stepped away, returning a few minutes later with a printed file. I took it with steady hands, though my heart was anything but steady. There it was, my name, my signature, page after page, authorization forms, transfer permissions, joint ownership agreements, all of it, bearing my handwriting. But something about it felt off. Not wrong enough to immediately prove, but wrong enough that I could feel it. Like looking at a photograph that had been slightly altered, you couldn't always explain what had changed, but you knew it wasn't quite real. I want copies of all of this, I said quietly. Of course, she replied. As she walked away again, I sat there, staring at the papers in front of me, trying to reconcile the person I knew myself to be with the version of me these documents suggested. Careless, forgetful, dependent. That wasn't me. It had never been me. And yet, that was the story being built around me, carefully, deliberately. And for the first time, a thought formed in my mind that I couldn't ignore anymore. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a plan. The first time I realized I was being pushed out of my own life wasn't at the bank. It wasn't even during those tense phone calls with Jason. It was at my sister's birthday dinner. A place where I should have felt safe. A place where I had always belonged. My younger sister Elena had invited a small group of family and close friends to celebrate her 65th birthday. It was held at her house. Warm lights, soft music, the smell of home-cooked food filling the air. For years, these gatherings had been my anchor. Familiar faces, familiar laughter. A reminder that no matter how much life changed, some things stayed the same. Or at least, I thought they did. When I walked in that evening, I noticed it immediately. The way conversations paused just for a second too long. The way a few people smiled at me, but with something hesitant behind it. I brushed it off at first. "You're imagining things," I told myself. I hugged Elena, handed her the gift I'd carefully picked out, and tried to settle into the evening. Jason and Emily arrived shortly after me. Emily greeted everyone effortlessly, her voice warm, her smile perfectly placed. Jason followed close behind, shaking hands, making small talk, playing the role of the attentive son. If you didn't know better, you'd think everything was perfectly normal. For a while, I almost believed it myself. We were sitting around the dining table when it happened. Dinner had just been served, roasted chicken, mashed potatoes, Elena's famous green beans. Conversation flowed easily, drifting from old memories to recent news. Then my cousin Linda turned to me. "So Heidi," she said casually, "how have you been feeling lately?" The question itself wasn't strange, but the way she asked it was careful, measured, like she was stepping onto thin ice. "I've been fine," I replied, smiling politely. "Why do you ask?" She hesitated, glancing briefly at Jason before answering. "Oh, no reason. Just checking in." That glance didn't go unnoticed. Neither did the silence that followed. It was subtle, but it was there. Something had shifted in the room, and suddenly I wasn't just another guest anymore. I was the topic. A little later, I excused myself to get a glass of water. As I walked down the hallway toward the kitchen, I heard voices coming from the living room, low-hushed. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop, but then I heard my name. "She's been forgetting things more often," Jason was saying. I froze. She doesn't even remember signing some of her own paperwork. My heart started to pound. "That must be scary," someone else said quietly. "It is," Emily replied softly. "We're just trying to make sure she's taken care of." Taken care of. The words echoed in my ears, but they didn't feel kind. They felt calculated. I stood there for a moment, my hand resting against the wall, trying to steady myself. They weren't talking about me like I was a person. They were talking about me like I was a problem, a responsibility, something that needed to be managed. When I returned to the table, the conversation shifted again too quickly, too smoothly, like nothing had happened. But everything had. I could feel it now in every glance, every pause, every overly gentle tone directed my way. "Do you need help with that? Heidi, are you sure you remember? Maybe you should sit down." It wasn't concern. It was something else. Something that made me feel smaller with every passing minute. At one point, I reached for the salt. A simple, automatic movement. But my hand knocked lightly against a glass, causing it to wobble. It didn't fall, it didn't break, but it was enough. "Oh, careful," Emily said quickly, her voice just loud enough for everyone to hear. "I'm fine," I replied, forcing a smile. Jason leaned forward slightly. "Mom, maybe you should slow down a bit." Slow down, like I was fragile, like I couldn't handle something as simple as reaching across a table. I said I'm fine, I repeated more firmly this time. The room went quiet again, and in that silence, I saw it. The doubt, not just in Jason and Emily, but in everyone else. They were starting to believe it. Whatever story had been told, it was working. I left early that night. I made an excuse about being tired, hugged Elena goodbye, and walked out into the cool evening air. The moment I got into my car, I closed the door and just sat there, hands gripping the steering wheel, breathing slowly, trying to process what had just happened. This wasn't just about finances anymore. This wasn't just about control behind closed doors. This was bigger. Jason and Emily weren't just managing my accounts. They were managing how people saw me, rewriting my identity, piece by piece, turning me into someone I didn't recognize. The next morning, I called my friend Carol. We had known each other for over 20 years. If there was anyone who could tell me the truth without filters, it was her. "Hey, Heidi," she said warmly when she picked up. "Everything okay?" I hesitated, then quietly, "I need you to be honest with me." There was a pause. "Of course. Have you noticed anything different about me lately?" The silence on the other end stretched just a little too long. My chest tightened. "Well," she began slowly, "Jason mentioned you've been having some memory issues." There it was, spreading, expanding, becoming real in other people's minds. "And do you believe that I asked?" "I don't know," she admitted gently. "I haven't seen anything serious myself, but—" He sounded concerned. Concerned. Always that word, wrapped in care, hiding something much darker underneath. "I'm not losing my memory, Carol," I said, my voice steady now. "I believe you," she replied quickly. "But maybe you should get checked just to be sure." I closed my eyes. Even she wasn't completely convinced. After I hung up, I sat in silence for a long time. Long enough for the truth to settle in. This wasn't accidental. This wasn't misunderstanding. This was a narrative. One that had been planted carefully, repeated consistently. And now, it was growing. And if I didn't stop it soon, it would become something I couldn't undo. Because once people start to believe you're not capable, they stop listening to you. And once that happens, you don't just lose your voice, you lose your power. And I could feel mine slipping. One conversation at a time. The envelope arrived on a Tuesday morning. Plain white, no return address that meant anything to me. At first, I almost set it aside with the rest of the mail bills, advertisements, things that could wait. But something about the weight of it felt different, heavier, important. I opened it slowly, standing by the kitchen counter, the same place where so many things in my life had quietly changed without my permission. The first word I saw was notice. My stomach dropped. By the time I reached the second paragraph, my hands were shaking so badly I had to sit down. Jason had filed a petition, a legal petition, to declare me mentally unfit, to take guardianship over me. I read it again. Then again. Each time, hoping I had misunderstood something. But the words didn't change. They were precise, cold, final. Petition for conservatorship of Heidi Ramos. Conservatorship. A word I had only ever heard in passing, usually in stories about celebrities or extreme cases. People who truly couldn't take care of themselves. People who had lost control of their own lives. And now, that word was attached to me. According to the document, Jason was requesting full authority over my financial decisions, my medical care, my legal rights, everything. If the court approved it, I wouldn't just lose control of my money. I would lose control of my life. I felt something inside me fracture. Not just fear, not just anger, something deeper, something heavier. Because this wasn't just a disagreement anymore. This was a declaration. My own son was telling the world that I was no longer capable of being myself. I don't remember how long I sat there. Minutes, maybe longer. Just staring at the paper, my thoughts circling the same question over and over again. How did we get here? Eventually, I reached for my phone. I didn't hesitate this time. I called him. He answered on the second ring. "Hey, Mom." His voice sounded normal, too normal. "What is this?" I asked, holding the paper in my hand like it might burn me. There was a pause. Then quietly, "You got the notice." "That's not an answer, Jason." Another pause, longer this time. Then he exhaled. "Mom, we talked about this." "No, we didn't," I said, my voice tightening. "We never talked about you going to court and trying to take control of my entire life." "It's not like that," he said quickly. "It is exactly like that," I shot back. "Do you even understand what this means?" "I understand perfectly," he replied. "You need help." The words hit harder than anything he had said before. "I do not need help," I said slowly, each word deliberate. "You don't see it," he insisted. "That's the problem." "What problem?" I demanded. "What exactly have I done that makes you think I can't take care of myself?" "You've been forgetting things," he said again, like it was a fact carved in stone. "You've been making poor decisions." "Like what I pressed." There was silence. Then, the accounts. The paperwork. "You didn't even realize what you signed." My chest tightened. "I trusted you," I said. "And I'm honoring that trust," he replied. "I'm stepping in before things get worse." Worse. I almost laughed. "You've already taken my money," I said. "You've already changed my accounts, and now you want to take everything else." "That's not fair," he said, his tone sharpening slightly. "I'm trying to protect you. From what I asked. From myself. Yes." The word landed like a blow. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then I asked the question I had been avoiding. "Is this your idea, or Emily's?" The silence that followed told me everything. "It's not about her," he said finally. "Then why does it feel like I'm talking to someone I don't even recognize anymore?" I whispered. He didn't answer. When I hung up, something inside me had shifted. Up until that moment, part of me had still been hoping this was all a misunderstanding, a mistake, something that could be talked through. But this was intentional, planned, filed, set into motion. I looked back down at the document, forcing myself to read the details more carefully. There would be a hearing, a date, a courtroom, a judge, and evidence. Jason would present his case, and I would have to defend myself, defend my own mind. The realization was almost surreal. At 68 years old, after a lifetime of managing my own life, raising a child, building everything I had from nothing, I was about to stand in a courtroom and prove that I was still capable of being me. Fear crept in again, slow, cold. What if people believed him? What if the bank records, the documents, the stories he had been telling? What if they were enough? What if I lost? I forced myself to breathe. In, out, slowly. Because panic wasn't going to help me now. And for the first time since this all began, I realized something important. If Jason was willing to go this far, then I needed to stop reacting and start fighting. I stood up, walked to my desk, and opened the drawer where I kept my personal records. Not the bank statements, not the official documents, my own records. The ones I trusted, the ones I had kept for decades. Carefully, methodically. because that's who I was. Not forgetful, not careless, precise, detailed, aware. I pulled out my old notebooks, my files, every piece of documentation I had. If there was a truth buried somewhere in all of this, I was going to find it, because I knew something Jason didn't seem to understand. You can try to rewrite a story. You can try to convince people of a different version of events. But facts, real facts, don't disappear. And if I could find them, if I could prove even one thing didn't add up, then maybe, just maybe, I could stop this before it took everything from me. I looked back at the court date printed on the paper. 2 weeks. That's all I had. 2 weeks to prove I wasn't crazy. 2 weeks to take my life back. Life. And for the first time since this all began, I wasn't just afraid. I was determined. The next 2 weeks became the longest I had ever lived through. Not because of what was happening around me, but because of what was happening inside me. Every thought, every memory, every decision. I questioned all of it. The first thing I did was exactly what I had never imagined I would need to do. I started looking for a lawyer. At 68 years old, after a lifetime of staying out of trouble, I found myself sitting in waiting rooms explaining to strangers why my own son was trying to take control of my life. The first office I walked into smelled like polished wood and coffee. The receptionist smiled politely, asked me to fill out a form, and told me someone would be with me shortly. When the attorney finally sat across from me, I told my story carefully. Every detail, every document, every conversation. I expected concern. I hoped for support. What I got was hesitation. He flipped through the papers slowly, his expression tightening just slightly. "Mrs. Ramos," he said carefully, "these cases can be complicated." "I understand that," I replied. "That's why I'm here." He nodded, but he didn't look convinced. "Your son has already filed a petition," he continued. "He has documentation, medical references, financial authority. From a legal standpoint, that carries weight." "I didn't agree to half of this," I said firmly. "You signed the documents," he replied. The same words again. Always the same. I leaned forward slightly. "I signed something. Not this. Not everything he's claiming." He studied me for a moment, and in that moment, I saw it. Not belief, not disbelief, doubt. "Have you had any medical evaluations recently?" he asked. The question hit harder than I expected. "No," I said. He nodded slowly. "That might be something the court looks at very seriously. I am not mentally unfit." I said, my voice tightening. "I'm not saying you are," he replied quickly. "But if your son is presenting that argument, we need to be realistic about how it might be perceived." Perceived. That word stayed with me long after I left his office, because that's what this had become. Not truth, not facts, perception. I visited 2 more attorneys that week. The second one barely let me finish speaking before he said, "Guardianship cases are difficult to contest, especially when family is involved." The third one was kinder, but just as uncertain. "I'm sorry," she said gently. "I don't think I'm the right person for this case." Each time I walked out, the same feeling followed me. Like I was slipping further into a version of myself I didn't recognize. One where my voice didn't carry weight, where my words needed to be proven before they were even heard. By the 4th day, exhaustion had settled into my bones. Not physical exhaustion. Something deeper. The kind that comes from constantly having to defend your own reality. I almost didn't go to the 4th appointment. I almost canceled. But something in me, maybe stubbornness, maybe survival, pushed me forward. That's how I ended up sitting across from Lisa Grant. Her office was smaller than the others, less polished, more real. Stacks of files lined the shelves. A half-finished cup of coffee sat on her desk. She didn't look rushed, or distracted, or skeptical. She just looked attentive. Tell me everything, she said. And so I did. Again. But this time, something was different. She didn't interrupt. She didn't jump to conclusions. She didn't look at me like she was trying to decide whether I was telling the truth. She just listened, really listened. When I finished, there was a long silence. Then she leaned back slightly in her chair. Something doesn't add up, she said. The words hit me like a lifeline. You see it too? I asked almost too quickly. She nodded. These documents, she said, tapping the stack of papers in front of her. They're thorough. Too thorough. I frowned slightly. What do you mean? I mean, she continued, if someone were truly mentally unfit, you wouldn't expect them to consistently sign complex financial documents at exactly the right moments to benefit someone else. I felt my breath catch. That was it. That was the thing I had been feeling, but couldn't fully articulate. The contradiction. If I were really losing my memory. I said slowly then, how would I be able to sign everything so precisely? Lisa gave a small nod. Exactly. For the first time in days, I felt something shift. Hope. But she added carefully, that's not enough on its own. My heart sank slightly. We're going to need evidence, she continued. Clear, undeniable evidence that something is off. I have my records, I said quickly. My notebooks, my logs, everything I've kept over the years. That's a good start, she said. We'll go through all of it. She paused, then looked at me more directly. And Heidi, I need you to be completely honest with me. I have been, I said. I know, she replied. But I also need you to be strong. Because this isn't just about proving facts. It's about what I asked. It's about standing in a courtroom, she said, while your own son tries to convince a judge that you're not capable of thinking for yourself. The words settled heavily between us. Can you do that? She asked quietly. I didn't answer right away, because the truth was, I didn't know. That night, I sat alone in my living room, the house quiet around me. The same house I had lived in for decades. The same walls that had witnessed every version of my life. And suddenly, I wondered how long I would still have it. If I lost this case, would I even be allowed to stay here? Would I need permission to make decisions, to spend money, to live? The fear came back, stronger this time, but underneath it, there was something else. Anger. Not loud, not explosive, but steady, burning. Because I had done everything right. I had worked hard, raised my son, built a life, protected what was mine. And now, I was being told I might lose it all. Not because I failed, but because someone else decided I had. I stood up slowly and walked to the hallway mirror. For a moment, I just looked at myself. The lines on my face, the gray in my hair, the eyes that had seen more than most people ever would. I didn't see weakness. I didn't see confusion. I saw someone who had survived, someone who had endured, someone who was still here. No, I said quietly to my reflection. I'm not going to let this happen. The next morning, I called Lisa. I'll take the case, she said simply. Relief washed over me, but it was sharp, not soft. Because this wasn't over. It was just beginning. We had less than 2 weeks. 2 weeks to gather evidence. 2 weeks to prepare. 2 weeks to fight back against a story that had already started spreading. And for the first time since I opened that envelope, I wasn't just reacting anymore. I had someone on my side, a plan, a chance. But even as that hope settled in, a quiet thought lingered in the back of my mind. Jason had been building this case for months, carefully, deliberately, and if he had gone this far, what else had he prepared? The more Lisa and I dug into the details, the more unsettling everything became. At first, I thought we were simply gathering proof, organizing my records, comparing bank statements, preparing for court. But what we uncovered wasn't just evidence, it was a pattern. Lisa spread the documents across her desk, carefully arranging them in chronological order. "Let's go through this step by step," she said. I nodded, trying to steady myself. We started with the earliest paperwork, the documents I remembered signing. Authorization forms, limited financial access, the kind of things a son might reasonably ask for if he wanted to help his aging mother. "I remember this one," I said, pointing to a page. That was the first time. Lisa studied it closely. "And you were clear on what you were signing." "I thought I was," I replied. She didn't comment on that. Instead, she moved to the next set of documents. Then the next. And that's when she paused. "This one," she said quietly. I leaned forward. It was a transfer authorization form, one I didn't recognize. "I don't remember signing that," I said immediately. Lisa nodded. "Look at the date." I did. My breath caught. "That's the same day I was at Elena's house," I said, slowly. "All afternoon. I didn't even come home until late." Lisa's eyes sharpened slightly. "And this was signed at 2:15 p.m., she said. I shook my head. "That's not possible." For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then she reached for another document, and this one, she continued, was signed the following week. I looked at the date again. Another memory surfaced. "I was at the doctor's office that morning," I said. "I remember because I had to wait over an hour. There's no way I signed anything at the bank." Lisa leaned back slightly, her expression thoughtful. "This is what I was hoping to find," she said. I frowned. "What do you mean?" "Inconsistencies," she replied. "If we can prove that some of these documents were signed at times when you couldn't have been present, then we start to raise serious questions." My heart began to race. Questions about what I asked. She looked at me directly, about how those signatures got there in the first place. I felt a chill run through me, because I knew exactly what she was implying. Forgery, or something close to it. "But they look like my signature," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Lisa nodded. "They do, but that doesn't mean everything about them is legitimate." She pulled one document closer, placing it next to another. "Look here," she said, pointing carefully. I leaned in. At first, I didn't see it. Then, slowly, I did. The shape was the same. The letters were the same. But something about the pressure, the flow, the spacing, it wasn't quite right. Like someone had practiced it, perfected it, but didn't fully understand it. "I've signed my name thousands of times," I said quietly. Lisa gave a small nod. "Exactly, and that's why even small differences matter." She sat back again, crossing her arms slightly. "This isn't proof yet," she said, "but it's enough to start building a case." I swallowed hard. Because what we were building wasn't just a defense anymore. It was an accusation. Over the next few days, we kept digging. Every document, every transaction, every timeline, and the deeper we went, the clearer the pattern became. The mistakes Jason had been pointing out, the moments where I supposedly forgot things, they all seemed to line up with one thing: paperwork, signatures, authorization. "It's almost like he needed you to doubt yourself," Lisa said one afternoon. I looked up at her sharply. "What do you mean, if you start questioning your own memory?" she explained. Then you're less likely to challenge anything that doesn't feel right. The words settled heavily in my chest. Because they made perfect sense. Every time I had hesitated, every time I had wondered if I was mistaken, I had backed down, and each time, he had gained a little more control. But the worst part wasn't the documents. It was what came next. Have you had any medical evaluations recently? Lisa asked. The question caught me off guard. No, I said. Why? She hesitated. Then she reached for another file. This was submitted with the petition, she said. I took it from her hands, my fingers already tightening. At the top of the page, I saw a name I didn't recognize. Dr. Collins. My eyes scanned the document quickly, then more slowly, then again. It was a psychological evaluation of me. According to the report, I had shown signs of cognitive decline, memory lapses, confusion, poor judgment. I've never seen this doctor, I said, my voice shaking. Lisa nodded. That's what I thought. There's no record of me ever going to this appointment. I continued. Nothing in my calendar. Nothing in my notes. She leaned forward slightly. That's going to be very important, she said. I read the report again. Every word felt like a distortion, a version of me that didn't exist. She struggles to recall recent events. She appears disoriented at times. She may be vulnerable to poor financial decisions. It was all there, in black and white, a professional opinion, something a judge would take seriously. I didn't say any of this, I whispered. Lisa's voice softened slightly. I believe you. But belief wasn't enough. Not in a courtroom. I set the paper down slowly, my hands trembling. This is what he's using against me, I said. Yes, Lisa replied, and it's strong. Then how do we fight it? I asked. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she studied me carefully. Then she said something I didn't expect. We don't just fight it. We expose it. The word hung in the air. Expose. We challenge the evaluation, she continued. We question how it was conducted. When? Where? Under what circumstances? I nodded slowly, trying to follow. And if it falls apart, I said, then so does a big part of his case, she finished. For the first time in days, I felt something stronger than fear. Not just hope. Clarity. Because now I could see it. The entire structure Jason had built. The narrative. The documents. The concern. It all pointed to one thing. A carefully constructed version of reality. But like any structure built on something unstable, if you pull at the right piece, it can all come down. I leaned back in my chair, my thoughts racing. Jason thought I was weak. That I would doubt myself. That I would accept what was happening. But he had made one mistake. He underestimated me because I wasn't just going to defend myself anymore. I was going to uncover the truth. Every piece of it. No matter how uncomfortable it was. No matter where it led. And if that truth destroyed everything he had built, then so be it. Because I wasn't the one who started this, but I was going to be the one who finished it. The day of the hearing arrived faster than I was ready for. No matter how much Lisa and I prepared, no matter how many documents we reviewed, there's something about walking into a courtroom that no amount of preparation can fully prepare you for. The building itself felt cold. Not physically, but emotionally. Sterile, quiet, unforgiving. As I walked through the hallway beside Lisa, my shoes echoed softly against the polished floor. Every step felt heavier than the last, like I was walking towards something that could permanently change who I was allowed to be. Just remember, Lisa said calmly beside me, stay steady. Don't let them rush you. Don't let them twist your words. I nodded, even though my throat felt tight. I won't, I said. But the truth was, I didn't know how I would react once I saw him. We entered the courtroom together. And there he was. Jason, sitting at the opposite table, perfectly composed, perfectly calm. Wearing a tailored suit, his posture straight, his expression controlled. If you didn't know the situation, you would think he was there to help me, not take everything from me. Emily sat beside him, her hands folded neatly in her lap, her face soft, concerned, just like she always presented herself. The picture of support, the picture of care. It made my stomach turn. Jason glanced at me briefly. Just for a second. No warmth, no recognition, just assessment, like I was no longer his mother. Just a case. I sat down beside Lisa, my hands resting in my lap to keep them from trembling. The room slowly filled with quiet murmurs, papers shifting chairs, moving people settling into place. Then finally, the judge entered. Court is now in session, the clerk announced. Everyone stood, then sat, and just like that, it began. Jason's attorney stood first, a tall man with a confident voice and a practiced presence. Your Honor, he began, we are here today because Mr. Jason Miller has serious concerns about his mother's ability to manage her own affairs. I felt my chest tighten, not because of the words themselves, but because of how easily they were spoken, how normal they sounded. He continued, we will present evidence showing a pattern of cognitive decline, memory lapses, and poor financial decision-making that puts Mrs. Ramos at significant risk. Risk. Another word that had been used so carefully against me. Then came the part that changed everything. Jason was called to the stand. He stood up, calmly, walked forward, and took the oath without hesitation. And as he sat down, he didn't look at me. Not once. Mr. Miller, his attorney said, can you explain to the court why you filed this petition? Jason nodded slightly. Then he spoke. My mother isn't the same person she used to be. The words felt like a knife. She forgets things, important things. She signs documents without understanding them. She gets confused easily. Each sentence was measured, controlled, delivered with just enough emotion to sound sincere, but not enough to seem unstable. I'm not doing this to hurt her, he continued. I'm doing this to protect her. There it was again. Protect. Always protect. And in your opinion, the attorney asked, is your mother capable of making sound decisions regarding her finances and well-being? Jason didn't hesitate. No, he said. The word echoed in the room. Sharp. Final. And would you describe her as mentally fit to manage her own affairs? Jason took a small breath, then said it. She's not. A pause. Then more clearly, my mother is not mentally stable. For a moment, I couldn't hear anything else. Not the shifting of papers, not the quiet murmurs, not even my own breathing. Just those words, over and over. My son had just called me crazy. In a courtroom, in front of strangers, as if I were nothing more than a problem to be solved. I felt something inside me crack, not loudly, not visibly, but deeply. Lisa placed her hand lightly on my arm. A grounding touch. A reminder. Stay steady. The questioning continued. Jason described incidents, moments where I supposedly forgot conversations, misplaced items, signed papers I didn't remember. Each one carefully selected. Each one presented as proof. But as I listened, something became clear. These weren't random examples. They were the exact moments we had already questioned. The documents, the signatures, the inconsistencies. He wasn't just telling a story. He was reinforcing a narrative, one he had been building for months. Then Emily was called. She approached the stand with that same calm, gentle demeanor, the same careful tone. I care deeply about Heidi, she began. I truly do. The words sounded kind, but something underneath them felt hollow. "I've noticed changes," she continued. "Small at first, forgetting appointments, repeating questions, getting confused about simple things." "Simple things? Like what?" "Reaching for salt. Asking about my own bank account. I just want what's best for her," Emily said softly. Of course she did. That's what made it so convincing. By the time she finished, the room felt different, heavier, more certain. Because to someone listening without context, it sounded real. It sounded reasonable. It sounded like concern. And that was the most dangerous part of all. Lisa stood slowly. "Your Honor," she said, "we would like to cross-examine." The judge nodded. "Proceed." Lisa approached the stand calmly, her movements deliberate. She didn't rush, didn't raise her voice, didn't show emotion. "Mr. Miller," she began, looking directly at Jason. "You've testified that your mother is forgetful and unable to manage her affairs. Is that correct?" "Yes," he replied. "And yet she continued picking up a document. You also testified that she signed multiple financial documents over the past several months." "Correct." Jason hesitated for just a fraction of a second. Then, "Yes." Lisa nodded slightly. "And these documents, they all benefited you in some way. Isn't that true?" A pause. "Yes," he said carefully. The room was quiet now, listening, waiting. Lisa took a step closer. "And you expect this court to believe that a woman who is, in your words, mentally unstable, somehow managed to consistently sign complex legal and financial documents at exactly the right times to benefit you?" Jason's expression tightened. Just slightly. For the first time, he didn't answer immediately. And in that small moment of hesitation, I felt something shift. The narrative was starting to crack. And then the judge leaned forward, hands folded, eyes focused, and asked one quiet question. The same question that would change everything. "Mr. Miller," the judge said calmly, "if your mother is as incapable as you claim, how do you explain her ability to execute legally binding documents so precisely only when it benefits you?" Silence. Jason opened his mouth, closed it, looked down briefly, then back up. But this time, he didn't look confident. He didn't look controlled. For the first time since this began, he looked uncertain. And I knew everything was about to change. Jason didn't answer the judge right away. That alone changed the entire atmosphere in the room. Because up until that moment, he had answered everything with calm certainty. Every question had been met with confidence, as if the outcome had already been decided in his favor. But now, there was hesitation. And hesitation in a courtroom is louder than any argument. Jason began, then stopped. He shifted slightly in his seat, his hand tightening around the edge of the stand. "I was just trying to help her," he said finally. The words sounded weaker this time, less certain. The judge didn't move, didn't interrupt. He simply watched, waiting. "That doesn't answer the question," the judge said calmly. Jason swallowed. "I meant that even if she signed those documents, it doesn't mean she fully understood them." There it was, a new angle, a quick adjustment. Lisa stepped forward again. "Your Honor, may I?" The judge nodded. Lisa approached Jason slowly, her expression composed. "Mr. Miller," she said, "you're now suggesting that your mother was capable of signing documents, but not capable of understanding them. Is that correct?" Jason nodded cautiously. "Yes." And yet, Lisa continued lifting a document. These same documents required multiple steps: reading, reviewing, initialing, signing, and in some cases, notarization. Jason said nothing. "Are you telling this court," Lisa went on, her voice still calm, "that a woman who cannot understand basic financial decisions somehow navigated complex legal processes repeatedly, without error?" Jason's jaw tightened. She trusted me," he said. Lisa tilted her head slightly. So she trusted you enough to sign whatever you put in front of her? Yes, and you believe that demonstrates her incompetence. Jason hesitated again. Because now, there was no clean answer. The judge leaned back slightly, observing. Not just the words, but the space between them. Lisa took another step forward. Let's talk about the psychological evaluation submitted by Dr. Collins, she said. Jason stiffened. Do you know when that evaluation took place? She asked. Yes, he replied. A few weeks ago, where Lisa pressed, at his office. Lisa nodded slowly. And you were present? Yes. And your mother? Of course. Lisa paused, then turned toward the judge. Your Honor, we have reason to question the validity of that evaluation. The room shifted again, subtle but noticeable. On what grounds, the judge asked? Lisa turned back to Jason. Mr. Miller, can you provide any documentation confirming that appointment, a record of the visit, a sign-in sheet, insurance billing? Jason blinked. No, I don't have that with me. Lisa nodded. Convenient. She turned back to the judge. My client has no recollection of this evaluation, she said. Furthermore, her personal records show no indication of any such appointment. The judge's expression remained neutral but attentive. Lisa continued, and if I may, Your Honor, we would like to submit evidence that my client was elsewhere during at least one of the dates tied to key documents and evaluations presented by the petitioner. She handed over a folder. Time-stamped records, personal logs, corroborating details. The judge reviewed the documents briefly, then looked back up. Mr. Miller, he said, can you explain these discrepancies? Jason's confidence was slipping now. Visibly. I don't have all the details memorized, he said. The judge raised an eyebrow slightly. You filed this petition, he said. I would expect you to. A quiet murmur passed through the room. Jason glanced briefly toward Emily. For the first time, he looked unsure. Emily leaned forward slightly, whispering something under her breath. He nodded, then straightened. My intention was never to harm my mother, he said, his voice tightening slightly. I was trying to protect her assets, her future, everything she worked for. The words sounded stronger, more rehearsed, but now they weren't enough. Lisa stepped in again. Protect her assets, she repeated, by transferring large sums into investments under your control. Jason didn't answer. By adding yourself as a joint owner without clear, informed consent? Still no answer. By presenting documents with questionable timelines and a psychological evaluation that cannot be verified? Silence. Lisa let the silence sit, let it grow, because silence in that moment was louder than any argument she could make. Then she turned slightly toward the judge. Your Honor, this case is not about a concerned son stepping in to help his mother, she said. It is about a pattern of control manipulation and selective documentation designed to create the appearance of incompetence. Her voice never rose, but every word landed. I sat there listening, my heart pounding, but this time not from fear, from something else. Recognition, validation. For weeks I had felt like I was losing control of my own story, like I was being rewritten into someone I wasn't. But now, piece by piece, that story was being challenged. The judge leaned forward again, his gaze fixed on Jason. Mr. Miller, he said, this court takes guardianship petitions very seriously. They are not to be used lightly or strategically. Jason nodded quickly. I understand. Do you, the judge asked? The question wasn't loud, but it carried weight. Because what I'm seeing here, the judge continued, is a series of actions that raise significant concerns, not just about your mother's capacity, but about your conduct. The room went completely still. Jason's face had changed now. The confidence was gone, replaced by something else. Tension. I was trying to help her, he said again. But this time, It didn't sound convincing. The judge sat back slightly. "I will be reviewing all submitted evidence carefully," he said, "including the inconsistencies raised today." He paused, then added, "And I strongly suggest that all parties ensure the accuracy and legitimacy of any documentation presented to this court." That wasn't a warning. It was something more serious than that. Jason nodded, but his movements were stiff now. Controlled, not confident. The hearing wasn't over. Not yet. But something had shifted, irreversibly, for the first time since this began. The story Jason had built was no longer the only one being heard. And as I sat there watching him struggle to hold on to the narrative he had so carefully constructed, I realized something. This wasn't just about proving I was sane. This was about proving that he wasn't as innocent as he claimed to be. And if the truth kept coming out the way it had today, then the question was no longer whether I would lose everything. It was whether he would. I glanced down at my hands. They were still, steady. For the first time in weeks, I felt like myself again. And I wasn't going to let anyone take that away from me. After the judge's question, the courtroom didn't erupt. There was no dramatic outburst, no shouting, no sudden resolution, just something far more powerful. Silence, filled with doubt. Jason returned to his seat slowly. Not defeated, not yet, but shaken. And for someone who had controlled every moment up until now, that shift mattered. Lisa leaned slightly toward me. "Now we press?" she whispered. I nodded, though my heart was still racing. Because I could feel it too. The turning point. The judge looked down at the documents again, then back up. "Counsel," he said to Lisa, "you indicated you had additional evidence." "Yes, Your Honor," she replied. She stood calm and precise and walked back to the table, picking up a smaller folder. "This evidence speaks directly to the timeline of key documents presented by the petitioner." She approached the bench again. "These are personal logs kept by my client over decades," Lisa explained. "Detailed, consistent, and verifiable." The judge flipped through a few pages. I watched his expression carefully. He wasn't impressed easily, but he was paying attention. Lisa continued. "We've cross-referenced these logs with the dates on several critical financial documents." She paused. On at least 2 occasions, Mrs. Ramos was verifiably elsewhere at the time her signature was allegedly obtained. The room stirred slightly. Not loudly, but enough. The judge looked up. "Can you clarify?" Lisa nodded. "Yes, Your Honor. For example, this document, she held it up briefly, was signed at 2:15 p.m. She placed another sheet beside it. My client's log places her at her sister's home at that exact time, supported by multiple witnesses." A pause. "Additionally, we have another instance where a document was signed during a time when Mrs. Ramos was at a medical appointment with a recorded check-in time." The judge leaned forward slightly. "And your position is—" Lisa didn't hesitate. "That these documents may not have been signed under the circumstances claimed by the petitioner." She didn't say the word fraud. She didn't need to. Jason's attorney stood quickly. "Your Honor, we object, this is speculative." The judge raised a hand. "Sit down," he said calmly. The attorney hesitated, then complied. The judge looked back at Jason. "Mr. Miller," he said, "are you aware of these discrepancies?" Jason's throat moved as he swallowed. I don't have every detail memorized," he repeated. The same answer, but this time, it sounded weaker. Lisa stepped forward again. "Your Honor, we also request to address the psychological evaluation submitted by Dr. Collins." The judge nodded. "Proceed." Lisa turned slightly toward Jason again. "Mr. Miller, you testified that your mother attended an evaluation with Dr. Collins." "Correct, yes. And that this evaluation supports your claim that she is mentally unfit." "Yes." Lisa tilted her head slightly. "Can you confirm the exact date of that evaluation?" Jason hesitated, then gave a date. Lisa nodded. "Interesting. She turned to the judge. Your Honor, we have no record, none of this appointment in my client's personal logs, medical records, or insurance documentation. She let that sink in. Furthermore, we have reason to question whether this evaluation was conducted in a standard, verifiable manner. The judge's gaze sharpened. Are you suggesting the evaluation is invalid? He asked. Lisa didn't rush her answer. I'm suggesting, Your Honor, that its credibility is questionable. That was enough. The judge turned back to Jason. Mr. Miller, can you provide any supporting documentation for this evaluation? Billing records, appointment confirmations. Jason looked toward his attorney, then back at the judge. Not at this time. The room went quiet again, but this silence felt different, heavier, more decisive, because now it wasn't just about my credibility. It was about his. Lisa returned to the table, but her work wasn't done. She picked up one more document. This, she said, holding it up, is one of the financial transfer forms used by the petitioner. She placed it beside another. And this is a verified sample of my client's signature from her own records. Even from where I sat, I could see the difference. Subtle, but there. Lisa didn't overstate it. She didn't dramatize it. She simply said, we believe this deserves closer examination. The judge studied the documents carefully, long enough that no one spoke, no one moved. Then he placed them down slowly. Mr. Miller, he said, his voice steady but firm, this court is now faced with conflicting narratives. He paused. On one hand, you claim your mother is incapable of managing her affairs. Another pause. On the other, there are significant inconsistencies in the documentation you've presented to support that claim. Jason said nothing. The judge continued, and when those inconsistencies begin to suggest potential irregularities. He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. Jason's attorney stood again, clearly trying to regain control. Your Honor, even if there are minor discrepancies, the overall pattern still supports. The judge cut him off. I'm not interested in patterns that cannot withstand basic scrutiny. The words landed like a verdict. Even before one had been given, I felt my breath catch in my chest. Because for the first time, I wasn't on the defensive anymore. Lisa sat back down beside me. Quiet, focused, but I could see it in her eyes. We were getting somewhere. The judge looked down at his notes again, then back up. This court will not make a final determination today, he said. A small wave of tension passed through the room. However, he continued, based on the evidence presented, I have serious concerns regarding the validity of certain documents and the credibility of the claims made by the petitioner. Jason's shoulders stiffened. I am ordering further review, the judge said, including verification of all financial documents and the psychological evaluation. He paused. And until that review is complete, no guardianship will be granted. Relief didn't hit me all at once. It came in waves, slow, unsteady, but real. Because this wasn't over. Not yet. But it wasn't lost either. The judge stood. Court is adjourned. The gavel didn't need to strike. The message had already been delivered. As people began to move to gather their things to leave, I stayed seated for a moment, just breathing. Jason stood across the room. For the first time, he looked directly at me. And this time, there was no confidence in his eyes, only something else. Something closer to fear. I held his gaze, not with anger, not with bitterness, but with something far stronger. Clarity. Because now, the truth wasn't just something I knew. It was something the court was starting to see. And once that truth was fully exposed, there would be no going back. For either of us, the waiting was harder than the hearing. No one tells you that. They tell you to prepare for court, to gather evidence, to stay calm under pressure. But no one prepares you for what comes after, when everything is out in the open and you still don't know what will happen next. The judge's order for further review meant days of silence, days of not knowing, days of wondering whether the truth we had uncovered would be enough. Lisa stayed in close contact. We're in a strong position, she told me more than once, but even she didn't sound completely certain. Because in cases like this, certainty doesn't exist. Meanwhile, Jason didn't call, didn't text, didn't try to explain. That hurt more than I expected. Not because I needed an explanation, but because of what it confirmed. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't a moment of bad judgment. This was a choice. 3 days after the hearing, Lisa called me early in the morning. "They've scheduled a follow-up session," she said, when I asked. "Tomorrow." My stomach tightened. "That fast?" "That's not a bad thing," she replied. "It means the judge sees this as serious." Serious. That word again. But this time, it wasn't aimed at me. The next day, I walked into the courtroom with a different feeling. Still nervous, still aware of what was at stake, but steadier, stronger. Jason was already there. This time, he looked different, subtly, but noticeably. The confidence he had worn like armor before was gone. In its place was tension. Emily sat beside him again, still composed, still careful. But her eyes moved more now, less controlled. The judge entered. Everyone stood, then sat, and just like that, we were back in it. "This is a continuation of the previous hearing," the judge said. "I have reviewed the submitted materials, including the additional evidence provided by the respondent." That was me. The respondent. The judge's gaze moved briefly toward Jason, then back to his notes. "There are several issues that require clarification," he continued, "particularly regarding the validity of certain documents and the psychological evaluation." Jason's attorney stood. "Your Honor, we maintain that the overall pattern—" The judge cut him off again. "I'm not interested in repeating arguments that do not address the inconsistencies." That set the tone immediately. Lisa stood. "Your Honor, we would like to submit one additional piece of evidence." She stepped forward, placing a small device on the table. "This is a time-stamped voice memo recorded by my client," she said. My heart skipped. I hadn't realized she planned to use it today. "It was recorded on the same day as one of the contested documents," Lisa continued. "During a period when the petitioner claims Mrs. Ramos was signing paperwork at a separate location." The judge nodded. "Play it." Lisa pressed a button. My voice filled the courtroom. Clear. Steady. "I'm at Elena's house right now," the recording said. "We've been here since lunch. I'll probably stay a few more hours." There was background noise, voices, laughter, the sound of dishes. Real. Unmistakable. The recording ended. Silence. Lisa spoke again. "This directly contradicts the timeline associated with the document signed at 2:15 p.m. that day." The judge looked at Jason, slowly, carefully. "Mr. Miller," he said, "how do you explain this?" Jason didn't answer immediately. His eyes flicked toward Emily, then toward his attorney, then back to the judge. I don't know," he said. That was it. Not a defense, not an explanation, just, "I don't know." And in that moment, everything shifted. Because uncertainty, once introduced, spreads. The judge leaned back slightly. "You don't know," he repeated. Jason swallowed. "No." The judge nodded slowly, then turned to Lisa. "And the psychological evaluation," Lisa stepped forward again. "We contacted Dr. Collins' office directly," she said. "They have no record of Mrs. Ramos ever being evaluated there." A ripple moved through the room. Jason's attorney stood quickly. "Your Honor, there must be some misunderstanding." The judge raised his hand. "Sit down." The tone was different this time. Stronger. Final. The attorney sat. The judge looked directly at Jason. "Mr. Miller," he said, "you have presented this court with documentation and claims that are now being called into serious question." Jason's face had gone pale. "Do you have anything further to add?" the judge asked. For a long moment, Jason said nothing. Then finally, no. The word hung in the air, because it wasn't just an answer. It was an admission. The judge closed the file in front of him. "I have seen enough," he said. My heart pounded. This court finds insufficient evidence to support the petition for guardianship. Relief hit me like a wave, sharp, overwhelming. The request is denied. Jason didn't move, didn't speak, didn't react. But I saw it, the realization, and then the judge continued. Furthermore, he said, given the discrepancies in the submitted materials, I am referring this matter for further review regarding potential misconduct. That landed harder than anything else, because this wasn't just over. It was turning. The focus was no longer on me. It was on him. The gavel came down, and just like that, it was finished. Or at least, the part where I was the one being judged. I sat there for a moment, unable to move, unable to speak, because after everything, after the doubt, the fear, the isolation, I had been heard and believed. I looked across the room one last time. Jason was still standing there, and for the first time in his life, he didn't look powerful. He looked small. Walking out of that courtroom, I expected to feel victorious, relieved, maybe even a little triumphant. But that's not what I felt. What I felt was quiet, the kind of quiet that comes after a storm, when everything has been shaken, broken, exposed, and all that's left is the truth. Lisa walked beside me, her pace steady. You did exactly what you needed to do, she said. I nodded, but I didn't answer right away, because part of me was still inside that room, still replaying everything. Jason's voice, Emily's calm lies, the judge's question. Is it over? I finally asked. Lisa hesitated. Legally, the guardianship case is over, she said. But the referral for further review, that's another matter. I exhaled slowly. So there could be consequences for him. Yes, she said simply. We reached the front doors. Sunlight spilled in bright and almost overwhelming after the controlled environment of the courtroom. I stepped outside, and for the first time in weeks, I took a full breath. Freedom. It felt different than I expected. Not loud, not dramatic, just steady. But as I stood there letting the moment settle, I heard footsteps behind me. Mom, I froze. I knew that voice. I had known it since it first learned how to say my name. Slowly, I turned. Jason stood a few feet away. He looked smaller. Not physically, but in a way that's hard to describe. Like the version of him I had known, the confident, controlled man had been stripped away. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then he took a step closer. I didn't think it would go this far, he said. The words hung in the air. I studied his face, looking for something. Remorse, understanding, truth. What did you think would happen? I asked quietly. He looked down briefly. I thought I was doing the right thing. I let out a slow breath. No, I said. You thought you were doing what was convenient. He flinched slightly. That's not fair, he said. I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, but because of how familiar that response was. Not fair, I repeated. You tried to take control of my life. You told a court I was mentally unstable. You built an entire case against me. I was trying to protect you, he said again. There it was. The same line. The same justification. But now, it didn't sound convincing, even to him. Protect me from what I asked. He didn't answer. Because there was no answer, only silence. I took a step closer. Not angry, not emotional, just clear. You didn't protect me, I said. You erased me. His eyes lifted to meet mine, and for the first time, I saw it. Not confidence, not control. Regret. But it came too late. I trusted you, I continued. Not because I had to, but because you were my son. His expression tightened, and you used that trust. I said, my voice steady, to take something that was never yours. I didn't mean, it doesn't matter what you meant, I cut in. Because that was the truth. Intent doesn't erase impact. He opened his mouth again, closed it, then finally said, I can fix this. That stopped me. For a brief second, a very brief second, something inside me almost softened. Because that's what mothers do. We look for reasons to forgive, to understand, to make things whole again. But then I remembered the courtroom, the documents, the lies. And I realized something. Some things don't go back to the way they were. You can't fix this, I said quietly. His face fell. But you can learn from it, I added. He looked at me confused. I'm not your responsibility anymore, I said. And you're not mine. The words felt strange, heavy, but necessary. You're going to have to live with what you did, I continued, and figure out who you are, without rewriting someone else to make yourself feel right. He didn't argue, didn't push back, because deep down, he knew. I stepped past him, not in anger, not in bitterness, but in acceptance, because holding on to anger would only keep me tied to something I needed to leave behind. And for the first time in my life, I chose myself. Not as a mother, not as someone responsible for fixing others, but as a person. As I walked away, I didn't look back, because I didn't need to. Everything I needed to see had already been revealed, and everything I needed to become was still ahead of me. For the first time in a long time, my life belonged to me again. And I wasn't going to let anyone take that away, not even him. In the days after the final hearing, the world didn't suddenly become brighter. There was no music, no dramatic sense of victory, just quiet consequences. The first thing I did was go back to the bank. Not because I had to, but because I needed to see it with my own eyes. The same building, the same counters, the same polite smiles, but this time, I walked in differently. Not as someone confused, not as someone unsure, but as someone who knew exactly what had been taken and exactly what needed to be restored. I'd like to review and restore full control of my accounts, I said calmly to the woman at the desk. She nodded quickly, almost too quickly. Of course, Mrs. Ramos. No hesitation, no subtle doubt in her expression this time. Because now, the narrative had changed. They had seen the court order. They knew what had happened. Jason's name was removed from my accounts that same afternoon. Every authorization revoked. Every access point closed. As I signed the final form, my hand didn't tremble. Not even a little. Because this time, I knew exactly what I was signing. And it was mine. The next step was harder. Not legally, emotionally. I went home, sat at my kitchen table, the same one where all of this had begun. For a long time, I just looked around. At the walls, the photos, the quiet familiarity of a life I had built piece by piece. And I realized something. Nothing had been physically taken from me. The house was still mine. The accounts were still mine. The life was still mine. But something else, something deeper, had been fractured. Trust. And that wasn't something the court could restore. A week later, I received a call from Lisa. They've opened a formal inquiry, she said. I didn't need her to explain what that meant. Into Jason, I asked. Yes, she replied. And Emily? A pause. Yes. I closed my eyes briefly. This wasn't what I had set out to do. I hadn't wanted to punish him. I hadn't wanted to expose him. I had just wanted my life back. But actions have consequences, and sometimes the truth doesn't just free one person. It holds another accountable. A few days after that, Jason came to the house. I wasn't surprised. Something told me he would. I opened the door slowly. He stood there, hands in his pockets, shoulders slightly hunched. He didn't look like the man from the courtroom. He looked tired. Can we talk? He asked. I hesitated. Not because I didn't want to hear him, but because I wasn't sure what was left to say. Still, I stepped aside. He walked in slowly, glancing around like he hadn't been there in years. We sat at the table, the same table. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then he exhaled. They're investigating everything he said. I nodded. I know. I could lose my license, he added. I looked at him carefully. There was fear in his voice now. Real fear. Not for me, for himself. I didn't think it would go this far, he said again. I leaned back slightly. You keep saying that, I replied. But you still haven't said why you did it. He looked down at his hands. Then finally, I thought I deserved more. The words were quiet, but they landed heavily. More, I repeated. I worked hard, he said. I built my career. I made something of myself. And you just kept holding on to everything. I stared at him. You think I was holding on to it? I asked. He hesitated. I thought, if I had control, I could grow it, multiply it, make it better. And in the process, I said, you decided I didn't deserve a say in my own life. He didn't answer, because there was no defense for that. I sat there looking at the man I had raised, the boy who once promised to take care of me. And I realized something that hurt more than anything else. He hadn't become a stranger overnight. He had just become more of who he truly was. I'm not pressing anything further, I said finally. He looked up surprised. What he asked? I'm not pursuing additional action, I clarified. The court has already done what needed to be done. Relief flickered across his face. But that doesn't mean everything goes back to normal, I added. The relief faded. You don't trust me? He said. No, I replied honestly. I don't. The words were simple, but they were final. I can earn it back, he said quickly. I shook my head. Trust isn't something you earn back with promises, I said. It's something you protect before it's broken. Silence settled between us. Then he stood slowly. I'm sorry, he said. I believed him, but belief is not the same as repair. I hope you mean that, I replied. He nodded, then walked toward the door. And this time, when he left, I didn't feel like something had been taken from me. I felt like something had been returned. My clarity, my boundaries, my sense of self. That night, I sat alone in my living room. The house was quiet, peaceful. For the first time in weeks, there was no tension in my chest, no question in my mind, just stillness. And in that stillness, I realized something important. Winning in court was never the real victory. The real victory was remembering who I was before anyone tried to tell me I wasn't enough, and choosing to believe it again. It's been 6 months since that courtroom. 6 months since I stood there while my own son tried to convince a judge that I wasn't capable of living my own life. 6 months since I had to prove something I never thought would be questioned. And yet, in some ways, it feels like a lifetime ago. Not because I've forgotten it. I don't think I ever will. But because I'm not the same person who walked into that courtroom. At first, I thought what I needed most was to get back to normal. To return to the life I had before all of this started. The quiet routines, the predictable days, the familiar sense of safety. But slowly, I realized something. That life wasn't as solid as I thought it was. Because part of me had been living with a kind of blind trust. The kind that says, this is my family. Nothing bad could come from here. I don't believe that anymore. And strangely, that doesn't make me feel bitter. It makes me feel awake. I started small. Little changes at first. I met with a financial advisor, not because I needed one, but because I chose to. Someone independent. Someone with no emotional ties. I reorganized my accounts, simplified everything, put clear protections in place, not out of fear, but out of respect for myself. I updated my will, added specific conditions, clear instructions, boundaries that couldn't be twisted or reinterpreted. Not because I expected the worst, but because I had learned what happens when things are left unclear. I also did something I hadn't done in years. I made new connections, not replacements for family, but something different. I joined a community group, started volunteering once a week, met people who didn't know my past, didn't see me as someone fragile or in need of protection. They just saw me as me, and that was more healing than anything else. As for Jason, we don't speak often. Not because I hate him, not because I've cut him out completely, but because the relationship we had doesn't exist anymore. And pretending it does would only reopen wounds that need time to settle. He's called a few times, stopped by once, always polite, always careful. There's a distance now, a kind of quiet understanding. He knows what he did. And I know that knowing it is something he'll carry for the rest of his life. One afternoon, not long ago, I found myself standing in front of the hallway mirror again. The same one I had stood in before the first hearing. I remember how I looked then, uncertain, questioning, trying to see something in myself that others were telling me wasn't there. But this time, I saw something different. Strength, not the loud, dramatic kind, but the steady kind. The kind that comes from being tested and not breaking. The kind that comes from losing something and still choosing to move forward. If you had told me a year ago that I would end up in court defending my own mind, I would have laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it felt impossible. And yet, here I am. Still standing, still thinking, still choosing. Still me. I don't know what the future holds, but I know this. I will never again hand over control of my life just because someone tells me it's for my own good. I will never again ignore that quiet voice inside me when something doesn't feel right. And I will never again confuse love with blind trust. Because love should never require you to disappear. Sometimes people ask me if I forgive him, and the truth is, I don't think forgiveness is a single moment. It's a process, a quiet, ongoing decision not to let anger define the rest of your life. But forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting, and it doesn't mean going back. What I've learned is this: you can love someone and still walk away from what they did to you. You can care and still protect yourself. You can forgive and still set boundaries that cannot be crossed again. That's what healing looks like. Not going back to who you were, but becoming someone stronger, clearer, more grounded in your own truth. And if there's one thing I want anyone listening to this to remember, it's this: no matter your age, no matter what anyone says about you, no matter how convincing their version of your story sounds, you have the right to define yourself, not them. So, if you've ever been made to feel small, if you've ever been told you weren't capable, if you've ever doubted your own voice, I hope you remember this story. Because sometimes, all it takes is one question to bring the truth into the light. And once it's there, no one can take it away from you again.